Welcome to 100 Yards of Football. Today is my college football legend video today. Today I'm going to talk about Johnny Musso, running back, University of Alabama, a legend in Crimson Tide football history. Before I get started, I'm Vincent Turner. Today's video is being presented by betonline.com, a presenter of Bleed Podcast Network. So, let's talk about Mr. Musso. And what I'm going to do today, I'm going to highlight not so much his career, but I'm going to highlight his senior year, 1971, which was a very special season in Alabama football history. People don't realize that, but the Alabama football program was in a crisis. There was rumors that the University of Alabama wanted Bear Bryant out because he was looking around and looking at maybe taking the Miami Dolphins head coaching job because he had been approached by Joe Robbie. But another thing that was special about 1971 and Mr. Johnny Musso, the Italian stallion, Alabama was coming off 2 consecutive years of going 6-5. 6-5 in 1968 and 6-5-1 in 6-5 in 1969 and 6-5-1 in 1970. So 1971, the University of Alabama was at a crossroads. And then they changed their offense and went to the wishbone. And what was so ironic about that year, they went to the wishbone in the summer. They waited till the summer, and Brad Bryant made the change. And remember, leading up to that 1971 season, 1971 was the game that everybody say changed college football. USC coming down to Birmingham and defeating Alabama 42-21. And the late great Sam the Bam Cunningham became a legend. Because after that USC team left, quarterback by the great Jimmy Jones, and I just mentioned Mr. Sam the Bam Cunningham, it changed the whole level of recruiting of the black athlete in the SEC. So 1971 was also special too because in Johnny Musso's senior year, he was named team captain. And from an offensive standpoint, he carried the University of Alabama. But what was really ironic, 2 African-American players stepped on soil that year in 1971. Wilbur Jackson out of Osaka, Alabama, and John Mitchell out of Mobile. So 1971 was special because it was the fortunes of changing the University of Alabama program. And I was 11 years old, and I really would like to see if that situation didn't change and Alabama didn't turn it around, where would the program be today? But I'm going to start with Johnny Musso because he was the mainstay of that great team that turned it around in 1971. Let's start with his first game. Let's start with his statistics. That year he had 1,088 yards rushing. He was an All-American that season. Ended up being a second-round pick of the Chicago Bears. But it was the game by game that Johnny Musso brought to the table. And his skill set was very minimal. A tremendous runner between the tackles. A guy that took a pounding at 5'10", about 200 pounds. And most of all, he had the vision and knew how to read blocks. The first game of the year, the 1971 season in crisis with Johnny Musso in the University of Alabama, he set the tone. 2 touchdowns, 85 yards rushing, as Alabama went out there and redeemed themselves against a very good USC team, defeating them 17-10. And a USC team that still had Charles Young, Pete Adams, Jimmy Jones, Sam the Bam Cunningham, and Lynn Swan. Then the following week, Mr. Musso in the University of Alabama molded through Southern Miss. He led a total offensive attack that gained 496 yards that day, 22 first downs, and a 42-6 win. Then the third week against the Florida Gators, going down to Gainesville. First SEC game on the road. And the Gators had John Reeves at the quarterback position. And they had a backup named Shane Gainey. And you know what? Johnny Musso had 97 yards on 21 carries and 4 touchdowns as Alabama destroyed Florida 36-0. Then the next week, it was the Ole Miss Rebels. Archie Manning had just left. Mr. Musso carried that game, 193 yards, 22 carries, and a 40-6 win. The following week, went up to Nashville. Johnny Musso set at the time an SEC career touchdown record. With his 32nd touchdown in his career, broke the SEC touchdown record by running backs as Alabama beat Vanderbilt 42-0. Then the Tennessee Volunteers, my great home state, had been a thorn in Alabama, had beaten them 4 straight years. It was payback time. Tennessee had that great linebacker out of Fulton High School by the name of Jackie Walker. And Alabama got their revenge as Mr. Musso led the charge. 22 carries, 115 yards. In that game that was so ironic, Alabama offense ran 81 plays. Tennessee only ran 49. And Alabama controlled the time of the clock 41 minutes to Alabama's 18 minutes. Then the next game, out of conference game, kind of an unusual game. Alabama played a real tough Houston Cougars team. Southwest Conference. But back in the day, they was independent. And them Cougars were real. They had a quarterback named Gary Mullins. But they had a tailback. And I knew about him because Houston used to play Memphis State. And everybody knows I'm from the 901. And Houston used to come down in the late 60s and put it on Memphis State. They had a running back by the name of Robert Newhouse. You know how his Lord went on and became a Dallas Cowboy, won the Super Bowl. They had a great tight end named Riley Odoms that went on and played with the Denver Broncos. And they had 2 twin brothers that played the cornerbacks, Randy Peacock and Ronnie Peacock. Mr. Musso carried the load, 22 carries, 123 yards that day as Alabama beat Houston 34-20. Then the following week, real tough football game against Mississippi State. Mr. Musso gained 69 yards, 17 carries, but Alabama was able to handle Mississippi State 41-10. But this is the game that everybody wants to see, wants to hear. They played LSU, national television. I remember 11 years old sitting in front of the television. It was at 7:30 Central Standard Time kickoff. Would have been 8:35 here in Atlanta, Eastern Time. That's why I broadcast the show from. And Johnny Musso got knocked out of the game. But he had a touchdown, 61 carries. He had 61 yards on 5 carries. Alabama won that football game 14-10, but he was knocked out of that game with a concussion because he took a hit by a safety by the name of Tommy Casanova. And that was the game where everybody wanted to see, was Alabama real and could be a player on the national level? And that LSU team had a quarterback that went on and had a great career with the Baltimore Colts. He could throw that football by the name of Burt Jones. Then the following week, University of Miami, another out-of-conference game. Alabama ended up winning that 31-10. That Miami team had the great Chuck Foreman. But Johnny Musso had to sit out that game for injuries. Then it came back for the season finale. The Auburn Tigers, War Eagle, a very good Auburn team, who's ranked number 2 in the country at that time, had the Heisman Trophy winning Pat Sullivan, had the wide receiver Terry Beasley. I don't have to say no more. Actually, it was an elimination game that weekend because Oklahoma and Nebraska played. Nebraska ended up beating Oklahoma, accepting the bid to the Orange Bowl back in 1971. And Alabama and Auburn was playing to see who would go and meet Nebraska for the national championship. With that football game, Johnny Musso came back with a bad shoulder, bad knee, but it's probably his greatest show. 2 touchdowns in the game, 197 yards rushing, I believe on 22 carries. And that game showed everybody in the state of Alabama, Roll Tide, that the University of Alabama's football program is back. And what I remember about that game Because even me at 11 years old and a lot of national writers had picked Auburn to win the football game. Because Pat Sullivan and Terry Beasley were doing their thing that year. But Johnny Musso put it all out and led a great Alabama team to the Orange Bowl to play for the national championship against Nebraska. And that Alabama team, Terry Davis at quarterback. I mentioned Wilbur Jackson, John Mitchell, Robert Parkhouse. So many great players on that football team. But the catalyst was Johnny Musso. He had already set the tone and had already put Alabama football back on the map and really kind of saved Bear Bryant's, I want to say, tender at the University of Alabama. Alabama went on and played in the Orange Bowl, lost to a mighty, very good Nebraska team. They had Jerry Taggart, Johnny Rogers, Bill Kennedy, Willie Harper, John Dutton, and the great Richard Glover. But Johnny Musso, his senior year, had set the tone, because I'm going to give you one statistic. After Alabama went 11-1, the football was restored in the 1970s. And it was the greatest era of winning leading up to this time now since Nick Saban's the head man at Alabama. And Bear Bryant's coaching career, the 70s, was his greatest work. In 1972, Alabama won 10-2. 1973, they won 11-1. 1974, they won 11-1. 1975, 11-1. The one hiccup in 1976, they went 9-3, and they had a very big win over UCLA in the Liberty Bowl that year, 36-6. 1977, they won 11-1. 1978, 11-1, split national championships with USC, Barry Krause, outstanding tackle at the goal line. And then in 1979, they won 12-0 under Stetson Shealy. Another great football team, E.J. Jr., Don McNeil. What more can you say? Dwight Stevenson. But it started in 1971 with that Italian stallion, Johnny Musso. That team, 1971, is the reason Alabama football is where it's at. Go back, do your research on that team, and you'll see what I'm talking about. The first time in history, Alabama started 2 African Americans. And it was at a turn of crisis for Bear Bryant. And that team ended up being special. So, my final words. Once again, this video has been presented by betonline.com, by the Bleed Podcast Network. Very special thanks to my producer, Mr. Logan Landis. And it's very fitting. The only way I can think about the University of Alabama is the great Leonard Skinner. Big wheels keep on turning. Carry me home to see my kin. Johnny Musso restored the University of Alabama football program with its 1,088 yards rushing that year, 5.7 yards average, 16 touchdowns on the ground, 1971 first team All-American. The Lord's turn with Johnny Musso, a great college football legend today. I've been your host, Mr. Vincent Turner. Roll Tide. Y'all be blessed.